have a nice, super bright window right over here, and keeping a fish room can be a lot of hard work sometimes, even though it's a lot of fun and it's pretty relaxing. But one of the things that I see a lot of fish keepers get frustrated with is anytime you have any algae issues. Now, algae issues can be sometimes really like horrible if it gets out of hand, but most of the time it's kind of a pain in the butt. And of course you can correct all these things, but it can be frustrating at times because if you have a lot of tanks and you have algae popping up in all of them at the same time on a small scale, it's still gonna add up to more work. What I've figured out is whenever I think about the type of fish I have in my fish room, I think about critters that will utilize things that will naturally occur. In this case, algae will always kind of pop up in some shape or form. In some ways, I encourage it whenever I have any fry or grow out tanks, but in those cases where the daylight is kind of getting a lot longer, so I'm having so much more light here, and then there's a bit of algae popping up in all my tanks, this is now the time for my Placidochromis, which are my African cichlids, to get natural food that they would normally be utilizing in the wild. So in Africa, there would be these big, large rocks and the lakes, and they would grow a bunch of algae, and then the fish would be grazing on the algae, ripping it off, breaking it off, and that would be part of their natural diet. So in this case, whenever I have some algae pop up now, what I will do is I'll transfer it over to the Placidochromis tank temporarily, and then they get to naturally exhibit that behavior of picking off the algae and eating it. So without further ado, let's get started. We have some hairgrass algae growing up here, there's some over there. So I'm gonna move these over from here into here for a couple hours. The Placidochromis are going to graze on the algae. And since the driftwood is gonna be moved in here, I'm gonna have the space open to kind of do a gravel vac. So I can do a little bit of more maintenance for this tank. And I thought that you would enjoy seeing this little tip and trick. So let's get started. Oh, they're getting excited. I'm not feeding you, so I didn't feed them. Oh my gosh, so splashy. I took off the lids too, so this is a splash zone now. I specifically didn't feed them this morning so that, you know, they'll have an appetite for the algae. So they're super excited, and I think I'm gonna feed them. And they're right, I am gonna feed them, just not their usual pellets, but they will really enjoy this. So as soon as I move this in here, you're gonna see the Placidochromis start to graze on the algae. Now I do have some subwassertang in here, so I'm hoping they're gonna kind of leave it alone. They might nibble on that a little bit, but for the most part, they're gonna start picking on the hairgrass algae, and this is just a great behavior for them. This is something they would naturally do. Now I am gonna watch them, because if they start eating too much of my subwassertang, I will remove this. But I am accepting some losses as they kind of munch on some of the algae that is on here. This is all of the plants combined with all the driftwood. It actually looks quite pretty. I wish I could just keep this all the time in this tank, but after a few days, they will start picking on the Anubias leaves. So you gotta be careful what plants you put in here, because they may eat the plants you don't want to eat. In this case, they will leave the Anubias alone and prefer to graze on the algae. But if it was in here longer, they would just devour everything. So the goal is to have this in here just for a few hours, and at most maybe be overnight till the next day. Give them time to graze on all of the algae. So while that's happening, I'm going to do some gravel vacuuming in here, because I haven't done that in a while, so there'll be quite a bit of debris. But I usually just do water changes here. I don't gravel vacuum too often, because I'd have to move things around. But since I do remove the driftwood for the Placidochromis to graze on a few times a year, this gives me the chance to give this tank a nice gravel vac to make sure that the buildup of waste and nutrients doesn't get too big, because aquariums, they're a closed system. I find this to be really satisfying as well. So this is what the tank ended up looking like after I put the driftwood back in. As you can see, the Placidochromis did a really good job plucking a lot of the hairgrass algae off. They missed like a couple of tiny spots, but really, like, I'm pretty impressed because it's fish. They did a really great job and I didn't have to do anything. They enjoyed it, and now my tank is back to looking really cute. So thank you for watching my video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I think my Placidochromis are really cute. They're some of my favorite fish. And I hope that this video makes you think about your fish room, or even if you have one little fish tank, I hope it makes you think about things in a different way. Something to keep in mind is you have to be very careful when you choose fish to take care of certain issues, because if those specific fish rely on something that is currently a problem now, you have to think about replicating the problem in the future. So one good example of this is when people have an explosion of snails, they'll sometimes get pea puffers, and the pea puffers will eat the snails. But then once they eat all the snails, the pea puffers still need to eat, and they need more snails. So now the problem that you solved requires you to purchase or breed more snails, because now you've created a new problem. In the case of my Placidochromis, they don't really need the algae in their diet. The pellets that they eat, I feed them a variety of different pellets, do a really great job at providing them with a pretty good diet. So the algae becomes their special treat, their little bonus that they really, really enjoy, but it's not necessary. So next time when you're thinking about critters that will help control certain issues in your fish tank, think about, will this work as a temporary thing that helps you out, or is this going to solve your problem but create a new problem? And that's something to kind of think about. And on that note, I'm gonna go do some fish stuff.